Welcome to those who are joining. We'll get started in just a few minutes. There's a couple more people entering from the waiting room, but if you're here for our Parent Academy, the second part of our book study, The Price You Pay for College, you are in the right place. Welcome. We've got a couple more people entering from the waiting room. I am Robin Marath, the Career and College Admissions Specialist at Maine South. So happy that you all could join us. And I think we're pretty happy it's virtual tonight, considering the weather outside, or the weather that will be coming, I guess. So welcome. We'll get started in a few minutes. We are recording this. So if at any point, if you have to leave, you will be sent the whole recording when it becomes available tomorrow. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again to everyone. Thank you for being here. This is the second part of our Parent Academy, our book discussion on The Price You Pay for College. It is a three-part series. Part one was in November and our part three will be in April. So we're going to hit the middle part tonight. So again, welcome. I am your host, Robin Marath. I'm the Career and College Admissions Specialist here at Maine South. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you in person. If we have not yet met, welcome, and hopefully our paths will cross soon. I am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Mrs. Laura Wilkins, our career coordinator. She is working the waiting room for us and likely will take part in our discussion as we get toward the end of our evening here. But first, we're going to go through and just kind of do a refresh or recap for those who have read the book, but that definitely wasn't a prerequisite. You, if you haven't yet had an opportunity to read the book, that's no problem. We're going to go through. I'm just going to turn off my video because it can kind of be distracting as you're watching the screen there. I'll pop up again at the end, I promise. So if you haven't read it, no worries. It is a good read. I reread the second part before planning for this evening. And I really thought that the midsection, the value is kind of, it really hits on a lot of key things that will help us ground this discussion and hopefully inspire you with your conversations with your own children. And if you're a student who's joining, to really think about what's valuable to you as you're looking for post-secondary options. So that's what our middle point is. If you haven't seen the first part, you're welcome. It's on our YouTube, our Maine South CCRC YouTube video. You can go and check that out as well. And then I will add this recording to the YouTube channel when it's available as well. So the whole point of the mid part with Ron Lieber's book is the values that are important to you and your family. And so some of the values that he talks about, and I'm just these are gonna appear on the screen and in no particular order, not in the order that he spoke about in the book. He actually dedicated almost a chapter per these values. But the idea that I want to help come across is to start having these conversations, if you haven't already, with your children, with your student who's looking, because often you'll find that these values will change, or that they may be different from sibling to sibling. If you've had older children go through the process, they may be very different than the values that you had when you were looking. If you were, if you have participated in the search and exploration process as well. So some of the things that he mentioned, and again, also wrote chapters on amenities. And I know that he talked about some of those amenities like lazy rivers and climbing walls, but there are certain other amenities that weren't discussed. And so sometimes I talk about things like food options for our students who might have food allergies, or food preferences, that those things, those dining hall options, that might be considered an amenity, but really is kind of more of a necessity for a lot of our students. So I would kind of add that into it as well. Some things that we might not think about when we think about amenities. Mentorship, the ability to have that network and that opportunity to have a meaningful relationship with professors, and also perhaps with internship. It doesn't necessarily have to be professors. The idea of diversity in all of its forms, racial diversity, religious, socioeconomic, and I would add in geographic diversity. That might be important for you. You may have spent your whole life in the Midwest and you would like to leave it, or maybe it's really a part of your identity and you want to stay close to home, or that's a value. I also throw this in if you are an athlete or an artist, and it's important that your parents are able to come and watch you perform or watch you compete. Perhaps that geographical piece is also a part of your value system when you're thinking about where to look. The teaching and learning piece, and we'll go more into this as I provide some examples of this in theory and in practice, things that you can actually be doing to research this now. But Lieber talks a lot about the idea of small classes and having that ability to perhaps make those connections, because smaller classes, it's just easier to get to know your professors. But he also talked about the learning and that how students are able to meet new people and meet people from all walks of life, different walks of life, that's an important too. He talked about asking questions while you're on campus. For example, what are the biggest debates you've had both inside and outside the classroom with your peers? He spent a whole chapter talking about women's colleges. It is proven that women who are pursuing a STEM major at a women's college tend to continue with that major at larger rates than their peers at coeducational. There are 37 women's colleges in the United States, and so maybe that is a value that you will place on making a college list. Grad school admissions, we know that there are some majors where you really need to go on and earn a master's or professional degree in order to practice in that field. Probably a really good example of that is psychology. In order to get to that next level, grad school, you might be looking at what their admission rate to grad school is and what grad schools these students are attending. He talked about personal network, making friends, even romantic connections, perhaps meeting your spouse, if that's a value to you, but adding, are these items worth paying a little bit more for? And I hope I get this across throughout the night that these are very broad topics. These are almost rhetorical questions. It's just to get you thinking about what is valuable, what you're willing to maybe pay for, because the cost of college is very expensive, even for our in-state options. It's an investment, and there are definitely things that you may find as a family are worth paying more for. So that's kind of the whole spirit of this review here. Mental health centers, mental health is definitely something that I'm very pleased he spent a whole chapter talking about. It's something that we are seeing here at the high school level that we really need to be able to have open and honest conversations about, that the mental health of our students is just as important as their physical health and well-being. And so to look for those resources on college campuses should you need them. Obviously, career counseling is something that we as a department, Laura Wilkins and myself, are working with students to really think about their why before their where, and the career counseling that we do here at Maine South is going to be different than what you experience at the college level, but certainly something that might be the most valuable thing you think of when you think about the investment of college. Class size, first year salaries right out of college. And then I put the question mark. There might be some values here that he didn't mention, but that you would like to add to your own list. And so I definitely encourage these conversations again with your counselor, with myself, with Mrs. Wilkins, and definitely with your parents or guardians. The last thing I want to mention is every college has a mission statement, and I think it's really important that you check those out. So once you have a list, or once you think you have an idea of maybe where you want to apply, and this can start whenever. It's just even schools that are on your radar. Even if you're a parent of a freshman, maybe you look up your own alma mater's mission statement and see what you can see, what their value, what their mission is, and see if it aligns with your own values. I think that's a really worthwhile activity for every student to do. And if you can't find the mission statement, then maybe that is going to be a little telling as well. Okay, when we think about the value, what you're willing to pay for, and will it produce a return on investment? So if you're willing to pay a little bit more, and that's again a judgment call and a family conversation, how can you tell if it will produce the return on investment, right? And I don't have an answer for that, I'll be very honest. But what you can do is think about quantifying it and ranking really your values. So this funnel is just a visual representation of thinking about, you're going to put your money in, and what is it that's going to be the most important thing? Is it diversity? Is it career counseling? Is it your personal network? Your list will look very different than your neighbor's list or your cousin's list, and that's totally fine. But these are things that when I work with students in small groups and one-on-one talking about building their college list, I always like to start with an activity of what are your values. And so at the end of this, before we get into more of the discussion piece, I will show you where I have an activity where you can do this value, and you can do it now, and you can do it again a year from now, because again, things might change. Your values, you may find that the student, as they go through the high school process, maybe they take more classes and then really learn what is interesting to them or not, or what isn't, because they may take a class. For example, maybe they take a CAD class and then they realize maybe architecture isn't what I want to go into. I don't really like the CAD drafting piece, but I like, a different class that I took. So that's all a part of the exploration that we're helping them here with at Maine South. Okay, so a lot of the values that Lieber talks about are directly related to trying to find out some data. He's very big on asking these questions and getting to where the data points to. So I want to talk about a couple resources that he mentioned in order to find some of this data. So the first one he talks about is the college scorecard. And the college scorecard was developed by the U.S. Department of Education. So if you go to the website, and I will provide a PDF of this slideshow with the recording so that you can go ahead and click on these links and be taken directly to the websites. The college scorecard, this is just a screenshot of what it looks like. You can type in any college and find a bunch of great data. So graduation rates, median earnings, average annual cost, the retention rate, which is how many students are coming back after the freshman year to begin their sophomore years, what the average annual debt is of students who graduate, and then some nitty-gritty things like test scores and acceptance rates. So it has a ton of data. And then what I really like about it, and this is an example, is you can actually start comparing 2 or more schools with all of the data that you find. So I'm going to give the example. This is a screenshot of Purdue versus Ohio State. I chose these 2 schools. These are pretty popular schools for our students to apply to. From the class of 2022, our current seniors, we had 78 students apply to Purdue and 56 students apply to Ohio State. So they are pretty popular schools. So what you can see here is I just typed both of them in to compare. The graduation rate, pretty similar. So this is 73% at Purdue versus Ohio State and 78%. Now, all of this data, you have to remember, has to be taken in context. The context of this with the scorecard is students who started at Purdue or Ohio State and graduated within 8 years. This was their percentage of students who did that, which I realized 8 years is definitely not the goal of most families. But unfortunately, that's kind of what we're seeing now. And just to kind of put this in perspective with the last couple of years of data, you're going to probably see graduation rates pretty much lower because of the pandemic, because kids took a semester off or a year off, and maybe went back to that school, but maybe they transferred. You may even know people, in your own family or in your neighborhood where, they just didn't want to do online school, right? So they came home, maybe they attended Oakton and then transferred to another 4-year school. So even though they may have started with the intent to graduate at Purdue, maybe they ended up graduating from another school, but that percentage isn't shown within this figure. So I always like to point that out, that there's always a little bit of context that is missing from the data. Students who return after the first year, this is often a data point that a lot of especially parents like to see, but again, within context. So how you interpret this is 91% of students who started the freshman year at Purdue return their sophomore year. I think it can be a little bit misleading because it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is happy-go-lucky on campus, but what it does to hopefully ensure is that not only are they trying to admit students, but they're trying to retain them. And that, to me, especially as I do my job and I work with students, and I also think of it as a parent myself, is what are they doing not only to bring them through the door, but also to keep them there? What resources do they have? Is there financial aid coming through? A lot of times kids leave campuses because their financial aid packages kind of evaporate or are significantly reduced after the freshman year. Obviously, life happens too. There are things that we can't predict and why students transfer, or maybe they changed majors and the school doesn't have that major anymore. But that's just kind of an interesting data point. But you can compare all sorts of data from the scorecard. So it's pretty interesting. The next source that Lieber mentions a lot is the common data set. This is not developed by the U.S. Department of Education, but rather by private companies, most notably the College Board. They came up with sort of this ranking system, right? The U.S. News and World Report would be the most popular one, I guess, that we could say. And I even hate to point to that one, but most people know it. So they ask for data points from every college that's willing to participate in this. But most colleges do have this common data set that's available on their website, but you have to dig for it a little bit. So my best advice would be if you go to any school's website, in the search bar, you just type in common data set. So I did that for U of I down at Urbana-Champaign, and this screenshot will show you that it pulls up multiple years worth of data. So if you're looking for the most recent, you're going to want to click on that one. So 2020, 2021. And then this is what it looks like. It's just a spreadsheet. It's very raw data. And then below, you're going to see the tabs, which aren't even named. You just kind of have to click around to find the information that you're looking for. But I will tell you that almost anything that you can quantify is going to be found in the common data set. It's actually quite interesting, the data that you can find. So here are some examples of data. So we talked about earlier diversity as a value point. So if that's really important to you, the racial ethnic category, they do break that down in terms of how many from each category and who are this I look specifically for undergraduate students, since our students are in high school. That's probably what population they're most looking for. There also is the student to faculty ratio, number of class sections. You can go on and find a bunch of different interesting data points if you want to do a deep dive. You can also take a look at grad rates. So it has a lot of the same data that the college scorecard does, but it goes even further. A couple things that maybe the scorecard doesn't have that this common data set does would be Greek life percentages. So sometimes our students come in and say, that's something that's really important to me. I want to have a vibrant social life, and the Greek life is something I'm interested in joining. So if you're trying to figure out if a school has a large Greek life, it will be found here on the common data set. You can also find it on a website, but it gives you a little bit more of those specific numbers. So it might be something you want to take a look at. I also like that you can find the percentage of out-of-state students. So if that geographical diversity is really important to you, you want to get beyond the Midwest, you want to know how many students come from out of state, especially if it's a state school, a public state school, you can find that information too. And then there is another tab, and you just kind of have to click around because they all kind of look like this, is the factors in acceptance. So what does a college look for? Things that you might think that they look for are probably their rigor, GPA, test scores, although remember most schools are now test optional, but it also indicates if they consider letters of recommendation, interviews, extracurricular activities. If you're a first generation student, or if you're a legacy student, meaning your mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, or perhaps sibling graduated from that college or university. So it has a lot of things. You can spend a lot of time on a common data set, I will tell you that. But for those that really love the data and like to compare things, I definitely recommend you check that out. Lieber then talks a lot about certain small colleges and gives some good examples, which I think is helpful because a lot of times when I've read books or I've been in webinars, they talk a lot around the subject, but you don't get concrete examples. So I appreciate that he kind of calls out some of these schools, mostly in a good way, about what their offerings are. I'm not going to go over every single school that he mentions, but I do want to talk about Denison University just to show you what things you can glean just from the website about what they're offering. Denison University, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, is a small private liberal arts college located in Granville, Ohio, which is just outside of Columbus. So central Ohio. It has about 2,300 undergraduate students. It's not a very popular school in terms of Maine South. We do have several applicants each year. And part of that is probably our small liberal arts colleges aren't as popular as more of the Big Ten type of schools. But these are reasons maybe that you want to consider smaller schools. And Lieber gives a lot of those explanations with those value adds. So for example, outside the classroom, global commerce, which I've highlighted here, is an interdisciplinary major. So there's no undergraduate business major at Denison and at many liberal arts colleges in general. You'll notice that a lot. It's like econ or something maybe similar. But this global commerce they developed as interdisciplinary, so econ, world language, statistics, things like that. But what he's pointing out that you want to look for is not just academic offerings, courses, et cetera, but what types of things do they offer outside the classroom that would make a student choose this school over a traditional undergraduate business major. And so that the onus is on the schools to do that. And I think Dennis, and his point is that Denison really does a good job of this. Also looking at that faculty and staff, he spent a lot of time talking about adjunct professors or visiting professors and how that is very prevalent in higher education today, that full-time tenured professors are declining. Those, when they retire, they're not necessarily being replaced with full-time faculty members, but perhaps these part-time adjuncts. And the idea there is it's just harder to form relationships with professors who might be there part-time, who may be working at 2 or 3 different colleges, depending on how many courses they need to to teach in order to make a living, quite frankly. So it doesn't mean that they're bad professors or anything like that. It's just a little bit more challenging. So I kind of wanted to put this into more concrete examples. So to talk about the idea of class size, so within the global commerce major at Denison, there are 11 faculty members and 1 is a visiting. So 10 full-time or more permanent professors and 1 visiting one. There is a Center for Career Exploration called the Knowlton Center, which is open to all majors. I should point that out. It's not just for the global commerce majors. But within that Career Exploration Center, they have 16 career coaches offering 3,300 individual coaching sessions a year. So that career counseling figure looks phenomenal. As a college of 2,300 students, they're offering, you can decipher about at least 1 individual coaching session per student, and sometimes more than that. Executives in Residence is a program where they directly connect undergraduates with successful business and nonprofit executives. So a great form of mentorship. Mentorship doesn't just have to be with professors or staff members at the college. It could be because of an internship or because they're bringing people who are actually working in that industry to you. And that's what Denison's doing with the Executives in Residence. The Summer Scholars Program is an undergraduate research opportunity that's fully funded and fully supervised by professors at Denison. So it's a great opportunity. Undergraduate research, especially for students who know maybe their next step is grad school and they're trying to get more experience, more recommendations from that undergraduate experience, or they're looking to do research as a career. So those are phenomenal opportunities. This is certainly not comprehensive, but I would encourage you to, if you're thinking about any school, whether it's large or small, but especially those smaller schools, is do they have opportunities that would warrant, because sometimes students think, well, if it's small, there aren't as many opportunities. But I would argue that at some of these smaller schools, there's actually more opportunities. And a lot of that has to do with its size, because students aren't necessarily fighting with grad students for undergraduate or for research opportunities, because there are no graduate students. They're the ones that have to do the research with the professors. So just examples of things to kind of look for and do deeper research as you're preparing your list. Undergraduate research, which I just mentioned and showed an example from Denison, there is a website, Council on Undergraduate Research, that shows 565 members. I certainly don't want to say that if a school isn't on this list of 565, there's no undergraduate research opportunities. I don't mean that, but if they're part of this, they probably have really good resources and great faculty, and research is one of the priorities for their undergraduate. If you explore this website a little bit more, you'll find that it's not just small schools, it's not just the Denisons of the world, it is large R1 research institutions as well. So that might be something that you take a look at. I know that sometimes it's rare, but I do sometimes have students who come in and say, I want to be able to do research at the undergraduate level. And so I would direct them to go to this website to explore which schools are part of this council. We talked about mental health earlier. This is something as a counselor I deeply, deeply believe in, that we need to normalize talking about mental health, especially as students embark on the college search and selection process. I can tell you that college doesn't cure mental health issues, and sometimes it makes them more exasperated, but it's something that you definitely can and should be looking at if you know that you're going to need the support and resources. And I'm pointing this out, Active Minds is an organization, it's a nonprofit that was started by a woman who lost her own brother to suicide in the early 2000s. It has grown, now has over 600 chapters across the country, and they do mental health awareness events. They do advocacy events and advocacy work. They host workshops and speakers to normalize talking about mental health so that students feel like they're not alone. Because a lot of times when students leave, they come from a large high school like Maine South, they go to a large college or even a small college, and they may feel more alone than they ever have. So we want to make sure that students know that this could be a very valuable part of what they're willing to pay for at that next level. Okay, so when you're thinking about value, how do you determine it? So this is a screenshot of a post-high school planning booklet. So I've developed this. It's an online live binder. It's an interactive binder. So if you think of like a good old-fashioned binder with tabs, on the left-hand side, those red sections would represent a tab on a binder and different categories. And one of the ones that I have is building your college list. This is a guide, and it's developed, I'm not taking any credit for this. It was developed by Edward Fisk, who is the author of the Fisk Guide to Colleges. But what it does is it has students think about what's important to them, and then they actually rank things. They give themselves grades, numerical values for things that are important to them. And then it goes through and explains what that means for them and what they should be looking for. So this is what I mentioned earlier that I do with every student when we do a building your college list workshop. So we'll run those this summer again for rising seniors. So that would be class of 2023. So if you're a current junior, and I do them every year because I think I tweak things, but you can certainly, if you're not a junior, if you're a sophomore or freshman, you can certainly have access to this values exercise and go through it. And then maybe take it again in a year and see if things have changed. Also within this live binder, I want to point out that there's a section on campus visits. After you've established what's valuable to you, I encourage you to go on a campus visit, to really go out and see these schools. Most schools are now open for in-person visits. And so that's the best way to go see schools. Understanding you may not be able to see every school, or there may be schools on your list that just logistically or financially right now, you can't go visit. There are virtual visits in that case. But if you can't visit a school that may be on your list, but you might want to start considering touring schools that are close by, especially if you're trying to determine things like size. So that's like one of the biggest ways to filter down a big list of schools, but it can also be hard to go see all these schools. So I encourage students to pick a small school that's nearby, like Elmhurst or Lake Forest, a medium-sized school that's nearby, like Bradley or Marquette, and then a large school. And then to really develop that feeling of, is this the right size for me? Whether it's a school that they are ultimately interested or not, you're trying to establish that size piece is really, I think, one of the most important value adds to the college list. What I see a lot of is students applying to all the same size schools. And if I can do a callback to that college scoreboard screenshot of Purdue versus Ohio State, a lot of times the data is going to look similar for large schools. And I don't mean to say that Ohio State and Purdue are the same school, not at all, but to really start comparing and being really intentional with those comparisons, I think it's important to compare really different types of schools and not just looking all at the same. And that's kind of, that's where we come into to help students explore other options. So in terms of taking all of this theory and all of these ideas and putting them into practice, there are two search engines that I want to make you aware of. The first one is Schoollinks, which you're going to see a screenshot on your left-hand side. Schoollinks is our new college and career platform that we use to explore career opportunities and then connect those to colleges and who offers those programs or who offers those features that are important to us. All juniors have been given a lesson during advisory a couple weeks ago about how to use school links for that college search piece. However, if you're a freshman or a sophomore and you want to get started, you can log into school links. All of our students, with the exception of seniors, which I'll explain in a minute, have access to school links and have been on it because we did registration through school links. There is a parent login that's forthcoming. Hopefully by next month, we'll have a parent login where you can also do searches on your own and actually suggest schools that will be in a section called parent suggestions. I can also suggest schools as a counselor or your student's counselor, and then students can favor and create lists of their own as well. It doesn't hurt to start looking and just start favoring. There's a heart-shaped icon next to schools that you can just use to favor. It's a great starting piece. And because School Links is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, we're going to start doing tasks related to the college application process through it. So it's good to have everything housed in the same place. Seniors, unfortunately, they had Naviance is okay, but it's being phased out. So their school search was on Naviance. So if you are a parent of a senior, you can still log into School Links because every Maine 207 student has an account, but it won't probably be as meaningful because they haven't been using it up to this point. College Express is just another website, but it has kind of some cool lists like schools for the outdoorsy type or schools that are considered hidden gems. So if you kind of like the off the beaten track type of list like that you would like to see what schools pop up, that would be a great place to take a look. Okay, we're coming up here on the end of our overview recap, but there are a couple things and events that I would like to point out to you. The first is our financial aid night, which will take place on Tuesday, March 15th, which is next month at Maine West High School. We rotate among the 3 high schools, and so it is Maine West's turn to host. There will be 4 sessions. Probably the most appropriate one for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors would be that first one listed, the overview of the financial aid process. There will be an English version and a Spanish version. There's no registration necessary. You can just show up and listen to the presentation, which will be delivered by our ISAC partners. ISAC is the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. They are our financial aid experts in the state, and they'll be able to explain the process, which will be changing. So if you do have older students and you've already filled out the financial aid form known as the FAFSA, it actually will be changing. So we talked about that in part 1 back in November, but this will be much more timely for you to hear from the experts about what that means for you as you're filling it out. The second session, which is also offered in English and Spanish, is really only relevant for class of 2022 because it's talking about understanding your financial aid award letter. So if you don't have a financial aid award letter, it's really not going to be a relevant experience. So we would encourage you to attend the overview if you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior, and if you're a senior, bring your letters to get more information about how to read those letters because they're not all uniform from each college. It can be quite confusing. Our last Parents Academy will be 2 months from now on Wednesday, April 13th. So I hope you can tune in for that. We will also record that session, and we will finish up our book discussion. So now I'm going to go ahead and attempt here to unmute myself and turn on my video and see if we have any questions. I am going to, if you give me 1 second, I am going to allow for you to unmute yourself, or you can feel free to ask questions in the chat. Okay, so I believe I turned on the function. So if you're comfortable unmuting yourself and asking a question, if you have one, that's great. If you'd rather just type it into the chat, that works too. Any questions that you would like to ask? If not, I might ask my co-host, Mrs. Wilkins, who is, we have the benefit of her knowledge here as our career coordinator. Any advice you would give from your position as a career coordinator in terms of looking at some of these values? And I'll add, Mrs. Wilkins is the mother of 2 Maine South alums who've gone through the process. Any advice you might have or tips?
So, hi, everybody. I would say taking a look at the hands-on experiences that your student may be able to get in their given field. And so that's going to look different depending on what their chosen major is. So whether they have a co-op program, whether they offer internships, whether they offer career placement, right? So some industries are really good about helping students get jobs after their degree is finished. Some do on-site recruiting and job fairs. And again, that's very industry specific. But I would ask those questions because we all know that there are plenty of students out there that are wonderfully educated and unemployed. And so, you know, from my perspective in my role and also my perspective as a parent, that's a really important thing. And so I will say that one of my daughters is a architecture major and found a really wonderful program where she was able to have co-op, which means she got paid to work 3 semesters. She was in a 10-semester program, but 3 of those were paid in a firm. And so she truly has an understanding of what it's like to work. She comes out with some hours toward her, you know, architect licensing requirements. And so that's been really, really important. And we found really great value in that. That's not true in every industry, but if your student is an engineering major, there's lots of programs that offer something like that, and that's super valuable.
Thank you for that perspective. So there was a question and I typed part of the answer. The question was, is the financial aid night on March 15th going to be recorded? It is not. It is going to be a live event only. But I can say that our ISAC rep, who is available at all 3 of the high schools once a week. So since October, Eduardo Vaca is his name. He has been here at Maine South on Mondays from 11:30 to 3. And so if you can't make that financial aid night, you can certainly make either an individual appointment with him. Your student can, you're welcome to come into the building to meet with him during those hours, or chat with him and find a mutual time that maybe doesn't fit that Monday timeframe that he's here. He's available other times, but that's when he's specifically scheduled to be here. So if you can't make it, we'll have extra resources. Usually ISAC will provide handouts, overviews of things that you need to think about, and we'll have extras in the CCRC after the evening so your student can stop by and pick those up as well. But we decided to just have a live presentation this time. And then someone asked about the folder with the tabs. That I think I call it the post-high school planning booklet. It is available on the CCRC website and it's open to anyone. So it's also duplicated on, for sure, the class of 2023 and class of 22 Google Classrooms. And I'm going to check to make sure that it's on 24 and 25's classroom as well. But right now it's available on the website, and it's just a bunch of Google Docs you can access. And what's nice about having it not in a print format is I can update in real time, and then it updates on the binder. So we all know as soon as we print something, it's obsolete, right? With updates. So we do it this way so that we can update as needed as we go. I'm just going to take a look at the chat here and see what else we can do. Do you do the financial aid presentations every year? Yes, it's an annual event. It's always been in March. And usually what we do, to give you an idea of our district events, so every March is the financial aid night, and then every September is the college fair. So some of you may have attended it. It was at Maine South. We do rotate that. It will be at Maine East this September. In conjunction with that, we do a bunch of breakout sessions, and there's always one on financial aid as well. So if you can attend in March, you could come to the breakout session at the college fair. So it's usually, it runs alongside the college fair. Like we usually have a classroom set up or another space that's away from the college reps, but that has financial aid as the presentation. And it's also presented by our ISAC reps. Another thing that we do district-wide, but we do them at all 3 buildings, is a financial aid workshop. And I should say workshops because we run several at each high school. And that's where seniors are able to come with or without their parents and fill out the FAFSA in real time. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It becomes available on October 1st. Do not fill it out before then because you will fill out the wrong one. So if you're a junior, just hold on. October 1st is that magic date. If you're a sophomore, it's October 1st of your senior year. Freshman of your senior year. So October 1st of your senior year is that magical date to fill out the FAFSA. Colleges visiting the spring. Okay, so we do an event called March Madness, where we have college panels come in. I will tell you, it has been a little bit of a challenge because it's something where the reps go to all 3 schools, usually on the same day. So with our block schedule, it's been a little bit of a challenge. And this year, it is being sponsored by our PE department. So all junior students who are in PE, and if they have virtual, they're invited to come. That will take place March 9th and 10th, but that's a kind of a junior only event. We're kind of working to see how this might play out later on. Typically college, we don't have a lot of college visits during the spring for a number of reasons. Either they don't have the budget to travel or they're reading. So for schools that are working on regular decision applications where those decisions are coming out at the end of March, early April, they're not visiting because they don't have the time to do so. So their travel season's in the fall only. So that's kind of another reason why we went to these March Madness panels. Do students get help with choosing applying to college from the CCRC outside of advisory? Is it mandatory? Students can request appointments with me junior or senior year. Unfortunately, due to the size of the student body, I am not able to accommodate individual requests for sophomores and juniors. However, I do work in the summer. So as soon as a sophomore becomes a junior, technically at the end of the year, they're able to make appointments with me over the summer as well. But it's optional, completely optional. Students are welcome to come alone, or parents are, I welcome parents to come. I have a lot of parents who come along with their junior or senior for the appointments, although that's not mandatory. But what is mandatory is that the student's there, because I really, really want to talk with the student about that. It's hard to talk about a student and what they want when they're not there. So that's one thing that I do request. A lot of students come and see me on their open time. I also will add that if you're a parent and you want to attend, but it's hard for you to get away from work, you can join virtually. So sometimes I have a student, with me, and then I have a student or a parent attending via Zoom or Google Meet. They can make an appointment with me through the CCRC website. I have a Calendly link, which is my online scheduler. Mrs. Wilkins also has one, and Mr. Baca, our financial aid expert, has one. So you can make an appointment with all 3 if you want, but again, they're all optional appointments, but certainly we do love seeing students. Mrs. Wilkins, do you want to add anything about your appointment availability?
Yes, it's the same. So students can make appointments through the CCRC website, or they can drop by and make an appointment. I see students to help them find jobs or some, career exploration opportunities, which we are posting and promoting all of the time. And we promote those on our Maine South CCRC Instagram. They go on the huge jumbo video screen that we have now in our student commons. We have them here on the board in the CCRC, and they do go out in the Hawk Squawk. I also see students who talk about internship opportunities for junior and senior year, and just general career, you know, if they're kind of trying to decipher between careers, we can work with, they do in advisory, they do use science, and they do some work on school links, but you know, I can take that a step further individually if they'd like to do that.
And we do encourage our students, when students make an appointment with me, I have a question that says, I've been on School Links and I've looked around and I've started favoring some things. That really helps me prepare for the meeting. So I kind of have an idea of what they're thinking about, because my meetings are a half an hour long, just so that I can see as many students as possible. And so advisory is really what we would consider our tier 1 outreach that every student receives, right? Because every student is in an advisory, and they, you know, so juniors, and they're not, sometimes they're the same theme. Today we had an equity lesson that freshmen through seniors received, but often they're unique for whatever is going on at that time. So juniors, at the end of January, was the introduction to the career and the college, and how that's linked in School Links, and how they can go from, okay, I'm thinking about these careers, to now where are those programs on the college side, so that if I need a 4-year degree, or maybe I only need a 2-year degree, to explore that career option, then it will show them those options too. So I do really encourage students to take a look at that, so that when we come, they can tell me a little bit more of, well, I'm thinking of this, or I like this about this. It just makes it a more meaningful discussion. And then they can show that to you. They can say, hey, look at my School Links account, and this is what I've put on there. I think it really helps drive that conversation, which is the whole point of School Links, that they can go and find things within that. But there are things upcoming for sophomores. There's Mrs. Wilkins.
There's a sophomore return on investment coming up quickly, which is kind of that whole idea, the mission of the district, right? To make students and families informed consumers, and sort of some of the topics that we talked about tonight, of what is of value to you and what are you paying for, right? And so if you choose that you are spending more, what are you getting for that, you know, those extra dollars, and just making students aware of those things.
Right. And I will add that next week's junior advisory will be about spring and summer opportunities, how to make the most out of your spring and summer. So job shadow, how to find a job shadow, how to create your own job shadow experience. The job fair, we host a job fair at the end of March for students who want a summer job. So like a part-time job. There's also summer programs. There'll be more about campus visits and things to consider when doing that. So trying to prepare them. And then all of the advisory lessons live on their Google Classroom. I know that parents don't have access to that, but you can ask to sit down with your student and, hey, show me last week's advisory lesson. Oftentimes they're recorded, because in order for the two of us to get to everyone, we often have to record things to make it more accessible, or the counselors are delivering the curriculum in a larger group setting. But if the slide decks, if it's not recorded, the slide decks are usually available on their classroom, so you can see that. But one thing advisory has been in terms of just delivering information that everyone needs to hear in the same way, has really been a huge equity piece for our students, that they're all getting the same information at the same time. So it's been something that I personally and professionally have been very thankful for, that we're able to expose them to this. And I can tell when the students come in and they make appointments with me and we talk about, oh yeah, schooling, yeah. And they have that perspective, so that everyone's kind of starting from the same baseline and has the same background and access to the information. And School Links will look at other things. It's not just four-year. I know that seems to be what we talk about a lot, but you can also explore community colleges. There's apprenticeship programs listed on there, trades, etc. So it really is, and we're developing it. One of the things that we are very thankful for is that we are in constant communication with the developers of School Links and making it unique to Maine South. So Laura and I spend a lot of time talking with our School Links partners, but they're making it better and better for our students. Okay, I don't think I saw anything else. Anything else I can answer or discuss before we're right about at an hour, which is exactly what my plan was for tonight. We are available by phone, by email, on the CCRC website. So from the Maine South homepage, we're embedded within the Student Services Department. The CCRC has its own website. I encourage you to explore that. There's a lot of resources on there. I try to duplicate everything that's on Google Classroom for parent access on the website. Thank you for attending. I will send out the recording and the PDF of the slideshow as it becomes available. So thank you everyone for attending. Stay safe. I guess we're getting some bad weather tonight. So stay safe, and we are looking forward to all of our spring events. Take care.